Hello everybody! I am so excited because today I am doing my first video request. Someone left a comment under one of my previous videos asking me to talk about my favorite webtoons, which I thought I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna add a bit of a spin to it just to shake things up a little. So I'm gonna be talking about 3 webtoons that I absolutely adore and 3 webtoons that I dropped for one or the other reason, and I'm gonna be going over these reasons a little too. So first I'm gonna talk about the webtoons I absolutely adored. And first one on this list is Cursed Princess Club. This is a webtoon that some of you are familiar with based on the comments left under my previous video of Webtoon Wars. The story uses a lot of classic fairy tale tropes and subverts them in a way that creates comedy. It is very refreshing. It has a lot of unexpected twists of events. It is really hard to predict. The story always manages to surprise you and keep you hooked in. The story offers a lot of positive messaging that is explored on a very deep level that makes you very emotionally attached to the storyline, to its characters, and it invites you to have a reflection about your own inner voice and how you treat yourself. It has left me with a really profound feelings, and I was really grateful that I came across it. The comic book tells the story of Gwen, who is a princess to Pastel Kingdom, and she is not conventionally attractive, which causes her a lot of insecurity that she never had to experience before because she was living a sheltered life surrounded by people who absolutely adored her and never had anything bad to say about her. And she goes through a journey of, leaving her comfort zone, attending to the wider world and facing all of its ups and downs, including a massive violation of her own self-image caused by superficiality of the world that she never knew before, and she has to kind of go through the inner journey of self-acceptance. It's a beautiful story that I can really recommend to anyone who ever struggled with their self-image and to people who like humor, because this story is actually very funny. Apart from the subversion of classic fairy tale tropes, we also see some movie references thrown here and then to the story, and everybody has a slightly different sense of humor, but this is just like my type of humor, so it was really fun to read. I absolutely love the messaging, the characters, they are very fleshed out, and the story commits its time to show their background stories so we can have a better understanding of them. It does close all the plot points, and the story pacing is consistently good and manages to keep us interested. This webtoon is in my top 3 webtoons, and I can seriously recommend that. The second webtoon that I really adore is a webtoon that is very similar, and I think I started discovering a certain pattern, similar in the way that it was actually the webtoon that, similarly to Cursed Princess Club, didn't take itself too seriously to begin with, and then it started developed into this deep and very emotional story, and that's a webtoon called Meow Man. I don't even know how to describe it. Like when I first discovered it, I felt like that was like so random. It was just generally a story about this girl who encounters this white cat and she brings it to her home. It turns out that the cat is actually kind of like a cat man. So he has like 3 forms, or maybe even 4 if I think about it. So he has like a form where he's like the cat, fully cat-eat cat, and then there's a form where he's like this humanoid cat thing that was just so freaking random, and just I don't know. The exchanges between the character, like the main female lead, and this cat person humanoid thing was just the most hilarious thing ever. I don't know, there was something about it that was just so ridiculous. I just absolutely loved it. And then his third form is like he's the guy, but he has like cat ears, but then the final form that he can change to is him being like fully human, so he has like human ears and everything. And the story at first is very kind of like based on, little innuendos about him being a catman. So he's like a cat, so he does a lot of catty things, like he sits in boxes and does like all sort of like randomness. And it's setting the tone to be very lighthearted, to be very kind of like random. We then discover that there are also dog people that have similar abilities to cat people, and we find out about their worlds. And this is where the story starts to touch upon some heavier themes, and you literally feel like, you would be just going downstairs into the basement. With every each step in this webtoon, it started to go a bit darker. The story was gradually getting heavier and deeper, and then before I knew it, I was really questioning the morality of the characters. And I'm gonna try not to give away any spoilers, but the ending absolutely crushed me, and I was ruminating over it for the next 2 following days. And I was really, really deeply touched by this webtoon. Meow Man is a story that I can really recommend to everyone who really liked Cursed Princess Club, and to people who like the balanced story that is essentially a bit of a love story, but it is wider. It doesn't only focus on the love plot. It explores other areas and is very balanced, so there's a lot of humor to it, there's a lot of entertainment, there's a lot of tension, and we get to see things from different perspectives. Even though the individuals themselves are portrayed to be villains or negative characters, we get to see the world through their eyes, and we begin to understand why they became the way they were, which makes us relate to these villains and actually feel sorry for them in a way. It's amazing, and I love that kind of thing. I love that kind of balanced storytelling, and these two are the cream of the crop of webtoon, in my opinion. And it's very difficult to pick the third because there are many webtoons that I absolutely love for various reasons, but on this occasion I have decided to go with The Trash Belongs in a Trash Can. This webtoon is fairly popular, so some of you might have already read it. And it is not your typical love story. It is more like a psychological drama thriller thing. It tells the story of a guy who seduces rich women for their money and is living quite a low lifestyle, even self-referring to himself as trash. He's a person who pretty much embraces the darkness within until he meets a light, that is Suji, who he encounters on the street and ends up saving her life and gets entangled with her, starting the whole bunch of drama. Again, I'm trying not to give away spoilers, but Suji is a character that is a very complicated character, shall I say the least. Even though at the beginning the story focuses on the romance between them, there is more to Suji than meets an eye. The story is very dynamic, it keeps on changing a lot, and as we get new characters introduced to us, we learn about their backgrounds and how they tie in with the wider story, and we get served a beautiful psychological exploration of these characters, their interaction between each other, and the clashing ideas they have in their heads create a story that is not only action driven but is also emotionally driven. We see the characters going through some hardships, and each one of them has their own journey. Those characters are just so profoundly deep and really complicated. All I'm gonna say to you is that this story is gonna keep you on the edge, and it is amazing. I absolutely love it. It's a story that you can still read for free on Webtoon, but it's ending soon, so jump on the binge train. What I love about this story is that pretty much most of the characters exist in a gray zone. There is no black and white. They are all morally gray, and our perception of them shifts throughout the whole comic book. It is a very honest story. The main protagonist can act like a massive jerk sometimes. So we go through quite a roller coaster with him, where we try to decide whether we like him or not, because he does some questionable things in the story. Shall we just leave it at that? If you like this kind of complex characters and the story that is equally action driven as emotionally driven, so you get to explore bigger themes while simultaneously being constantly tense and waiting for the resolution of another plot twist, you would absolutely love this story. It is really brilliant, honestly. And now we are going to talk about the webtoons I dropped. And I wanted to say something up front. Just because I dropped the webtoon and I didn't like it, in no shape or form I'm saying to you that you are not allowed to like it. I don't judge what you like. I'm just merely analyzing the reasons why I personally dropped these webtoons, and this is what I'm gonna be explaining in this video, just because this video is essentially about my taste in webtoons, so I am just talking about that, and here's that. So without further ado, the first one on that list is the webtoon called To Love Your Enemy. That webtoon was about the girl who grew up in a kind of like a toxic environment with her parents being in jail, if I remember well, and she was like a toxic liar to begin with. Then that really isn't explored further. I thought it was gonna be a whole thing because if I remember well, it was even put in the whole description of the comic book. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't quite remember, but something rings a bell. But generally, the whole story is very kind of boring, to be honest with you. At first, it was actually quite gripping. It was telling the story of this girl. She's trying to start a new life, which, based on the webtoons I picked as my favorite one, seems to be the theme I overly enjoy. And then she meets obviously, another character trope that I enjoy, that is the aloof stranger guy that gets closer to her, and we're starting off from the very good point, and then it just gets boring. I don't know, for me personally, with each chapter I was losing interest, and before I knew it, I entirely forgot that this webtoon existed. Maybe it pick up the pace a bit, but frankly, I don't quite even remember which episode I finished reading on. I've read it for quite a few months, so it wasn't like, something that I would drop immediately after, binging the first episodes and then entirely forgot about it. It was a part of my routine to read it. For me personally, the story was dragging a bit. It didn't get into the depth of the characters. Maybe it did later on, but until the point I was reading it, it felt a bit flat, to be honest with you. There was no real character exploration, and the story wasn't really action driven either, because there was not much action going on, and in general, it just made me just get bored and fall off. If you like this webtoon, good for you. I personally felt a bit bored with it. The second webtoon is a bit of an odd one, because that is the webtoon that I dropped, but I might actually get back into it. Maybe. It's a webtoon that I was reading for years, and it was always managing to be so gripping. And this is a story that is very action driven, and there are like multiple story plots happening. It's a bit of a thriller, a bit of mystery. On the forefront of it, there is a school crush and all of this stuff, but generally the story is much deeper than that. It is a totally another universe, and the author really attempted to do some world building, which is amazing. However, it suffers from the multiple plot syndrome. The author opened so many plots that the story began to be a bit convoluted, but generally these plot points are making perfect sense. They are being resolved, they are not being really abandoned, like in certain cases that I'm gonna be discussing further in this video, but they are generally carried on. But because of this sort of like a screen time that we get by reading the story once a week, it is really hard to keep all these plots going on the same level without detracting from the main plot, and I think the story starts to suffer with the pacing a bit. However, the story generally is very interesting. The biggest turn-off from the story for me was honestly the whole revelation of what the croaking actually is. So ever since the story began, it was a question that was hanging over everyone, and it was a massive selling point of the story. The story is literally called The Croaking, and we as readers are basically taking on a journey to discover what croaking is. And it's one big mystery for us viewers, one that we are waiting for a big chunk of time to discover. And when it happens, I'm gonna be honest with you, I think this resolution makes absolute perfect sense when it comes to the plot. It does. And it kind of fits the narrative. But on the other hand, it doesn't change the fact that it's massively underwhelming. Like, for me personally, it was just like the author wanted to have this aha moment, but it was like more like, huh, moment. You know what I mean? Ever since, I just gradually started to lose interest in the story. It didn't manage to grab my attention. And I was reading a few other webtoons at the time, and before I knew it, I stopped doing it. And I read The Croaking for a good, I think, 2 or 3 years even. Like, it was a long time. And it was just odd. It just happened to me that I entirely stopped reading something that I was quite committed to. But generally, I do recommend this webtoon. even though it has its issues, and these issues for the particular moment of time that I dropped it were too big to overcome, but I don't think generally they're too big to overcome. The story is very, very interesting, and I think you'd enjoy if you read it. And the third one on this list is a webtoon that is a very popular one, so I'm expecting to have some people disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. But for me, this webtoon was... oh, it's just bad. Man, it was bad. It was absolutely stunning, but it was bad. And the webtoon was called The Freaking Romance. The Freaking Romance was possibly the most beautiful comic book I have ever seen on webtoon. Honestly, the detail, the composition, the colors, the style, it was a pure work of art. There were some frames that were more simplistic than others, but generally, the art was mind-blowing. It was just absolutely stunning. Unfortunately, I just can't say the same about the plot. I just can't. I've actually read or heard somewhere that the author didn't like the romance genre but decided to create a romance story, and you just can actually feel these negative emotions towards romance, and they're reflected through the main character. And I absolutely hated the main character. Oh my god, like she was very entitled. She had this serious, not like other girls energy about her. Like I remember that one particular scene when, because she was like, oh yeah, I don't believe in love and I hate love and love is just to, enslave people and love bad and everything. And she's all like meeting this guy who is trying to basically, heal her and, fix her. So she trusts in love again. And he ends up like showing her Titanic, and I was like cringing. Like, ugh. It was just so over the top. It was like he plays the Titanic for her, and she's like, I don't quite remember. I think like she either fell asleep or she was all like, oh yeah, oh my god, this is boring. I can't believe people cry on this song. Oh my god, it's so bad, Like, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, you don't even have to cry at the ending scene. But the freaking, the string orchestra, the two elderly people who are drowning and they are lying in a bed together. None of it touches your soul, none of it touches your heart. Oh no, because love is bad. And honestly, yuck, ew. And her whole ordeal is just generally being selfish. She gets into the love triangle between her friend and the ghost guy that she befriends, that later on appears to be a guy from different dimension. And honestly, the whole triangle is just, it's embarrassing. Like, the author keeps giving us this massive cliffhangers where she's about to touch one of the participators of a holy triangle, and she's almost about to kiss them or touch them or stroke their hair or whatever. And like the scene cuts, and in the next week, we get nothing. We get absolutely nothing. We get nothing out of it. And it happens all the time. It's just literally the whole story. And I was just getting so annoyed with these because I was like, come on, like, just move the plot forward. What is this? Why are we stalling? What is happening? And then while we get all of these fillers, there are also some plots that don't get resolved at all or just get entirely dropped. Like, I haven't finished this series, so okay, there is a possibility that some point will be resolved in the end that I am frankly not aware of because I dropped the story. However, I have a sneaky suspicion it didn't. And one of the major things for me was the whole, Zilan mystery thing, right? And I'm gonna get into some spoilers territory for a second, if anybody cares. So the main character Zilliv meets Zilan, and at first I thought, because they had kind of similar features and kind of similar names, I thought it's gonna be like, okay, so these are like the two different versions of the same character living in different dimensions, and they would somehow get with each other, and it will be the whole, mind-blowing thing about what would happen if you start dating you, would the children still be you, and all of this madness. I really genuinely believed that this is where the story is going to take us, and I almost congratulated myself for being such a Sherlock Holmes and resolving the story, But then, oh my god, like it turned out to, okay, so he's not a ghost, but he's like from a different dimension where she doesn't exist, and she's in a dimension that he doesn't exist. And the apartment is kind of like a bridge that connects them. And there's this massive, massive thing about him having some sort of a shady traits or shady side of his personality. Like it is actually shown a few times. So the story hints kind of like, okay, so he's a bit mysterious. He might not be good. He appears to be this, as she call him, soft boy. But actually, the soft boy has a dark side. There was some weirdness around it. Like there was a whole thing about his mother dying, and there was this whole mystery about what happened to his mother, and that doesn't get explored too much either. We get one like traumatic scene with a puppy that I don't recommend to anyone, that it basically displays animal cruelty, and we just like, oh yeah, we hate her now. But the whole mysterious dark side that gets hinted basically comes with no resolution, as all of these bloody cliffhangers. Just, it's like the author forgets about it and throws it out of the window. And then somewhere halfway through the story, or maybe towards the end, I feel like it was like more towards the end, but that was the exact time when I dropped that webtoon, was when the author finally decided not to follow the romance genre at all, but instead create a weird sci-fi God knows what out of this comic book, and made the main character transfer into yet another realm where all of a sudden she's like surrounded by the faceless monsters that want her flesh and blood, and he has to go to rescue her. Even though he's in another dimension, he does it. And then like it's just the sheer stupidity of what the author is asking us to believe just gets me. Like, he's supposed to be wounded by one of these creatures, essentially stabbing him in the stomach. However, he carries on talking like normal to our main female lead while just following her naked for some reason, because they have to be naked. It's just so random. Like they actually have to get naked. There's something about their clothes, like they can't wear clothes, they have to be naked, so they end up walking around naked. And it's like, I don't know if it's supposed to be haha, but it comes across as a bit awkward. And throughout all that time that they are naked, he walks around with an open stomach wound, and there is absolutely no blood, and she never notices anything. And only when they transfer to her like dimension or something, like she discovers he was one. I mean, like what the freak? And then there's like the author at some point breaking the fourth wall and doing some weird mumbo jumbo. Honestly, like this comic just doesn't know what it wants to be. It's just a whole hot mess. And even though I absolutely love the art, I think it was one of the worst things I read on Webtoon, and I understand that some people may disagree with this. I am happy for you if you really liked it. But for me, the ridiculousness was just off the charts, so I ended up dropping it. So what are your favorite webtoons, and what are the webtoons you dropped and for what reason? Or maybe you have some other thoughts to share. If you do, please leave a comment, and if you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. I really love storytelling, and I really like overanalyzing characters, and this is what I am doing currently on this channel. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, please stay tuned. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I wish you a very lovely week. And I'll speak to you later. Bye!